All right, there we are. Hey, hi, Justin. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. All right, we are here for the Open Water webinar. Today, we're going to be talking. It's the second in our series on our using AI in sort of our everyday lives of what is it and how does it work and all of those things. And today, we're going to be talking. I think this is a really good practical session for people because we're going to be kind of going through the differences between uh, Google, like Google Notebook, Chat-GPT, Perplexity, right? What tools should we use? All those kinds of things. But before we do that, let me introduce myself. I'm Chris Albrecht, co-founder of Open Water, and with me today, couldn't have a better guest for this, Justin Simpson. He's the founder and publisher of the Here.Now.AI newsletter. That really is, it's a really wonderful resource for people who are looking to sort of get into AI. It provides just every week. It's every week, right? Because I bookmark it, and so I go back to it quite a bit. Where there are just a ton of great tools, like the one that just came out recently had how to use Chat-GPT as a task reminder, and it's just really good practical tools that they test out that you can use. So I highly recommend. It's Here.Now.AI. Is that right?
Here.Now.AI.com.
Here.Now.AI.com. I got it wrong. I'm 2 minutes in and I'm already getting things wrong.
That's okay.
But today we're talking about, we're going to go over some different models. We're going to show you some demos. If you have questions, you please use the Q&A function to ask them down at the bottom, and we're going to have a lot of fun. But first, okay, Justin, let's start off briefly. You know what? Why don't we do this? Introduce sort of yourself and briefly describe what the goal of Here.Now.AI.
So I think when we saw technology take over, there were certain groups that benefited from it, and a lot of people were sort of left behind. I think in AI, that's happening more aggressively, faster and quicker. The change of pace is so extreme that people are becoming left behind. So the usage statistics skew, as you might imagine, younger people, technologically savvy, but there's no reason that that should exist. And so our mission is to make sure everybody tries to see what AI can do in their lives. Can it help them at work? Can it help them at home? At least be aware of what's going on, because there's so many different and fun things out there as well as useful things. And so we want to make it as easy and accessible as possible for non-technical users.
I think that's really important, just to sort of reinforce that, AI is this tool that can cause fear and consternation. But I think the bigger point that you try to make is, unless you're using it, you're going to get left behind.
Exactly.
Right. And so if you have the options and the means to use it, you should, because it's going to just be more and more important going forward.
Yep. And most of the things that I'm going to talk about today, and in fact, in the newsletter, are either free, or they have a free level or a limited usage level. So it's not a question of spending a lot of money to experiment. It's just taking the time. That's the big one, is budgeting the time and committing to it.
All right. So let's dive in. First off, does it really matter? By that, I mean, like, there's Chat-GPT, there's Perplexity, there's Google Notebook. Is there a market difference between any of these models that people, or Claude, Anthropic, right? Like, there's all kinds of tools. Is there a discernible difference between them?
So I'd say for 70% of people, no. 70% of people are very comfortable using ChatGPT. It's giving them what they want, and they don't need anything more. Once you start diving into it, though, and you start to think about its application in your work life or your home life, you start to think, well, I wonder if one does this slightly better than another. And so at the margin, yes, there are useful features that are built into some of the models, and some of them do some things a bit better than others. And we'll chat about that, and I'll hopefully show some examples. But if you're not doing anything, just use ChatGPT. If you're a practice daily ChatGPT user, start thinking about whether some of these other models might help, as we hopefully can show.
I had heard broadly that sort of Perplexity is good around news and sort of general, like what's in the zeitgeist. Claude, I think, was more conversational. And then, ChatGPT is just sort of like, it's the Xerox, it's the Kleenex, it's the name that everybody just like, oh, throw it into ChatGPT. It's almost a verb.
So if we just expanded on that for a sentence, we could stop there, and that would be hopefully useful for some folk. Claude is taking over the creative world because it is seen by most folk who use it to have a more human voice, to have a less robotic sounding voice. Those of us who spend time in AI can start to see AI generated material at a distance. Somebody puts up a blog post or a Facebook post that's generated purely by AI, you can tell it has, it gives away that flavor. And Claude is least like that. Claude can also be trained. If you put your own previous written material in there, it will learn your style more effectively than the others. And so it's a natural one for writers and creatives to use. You mentioned Perplexity. In the beginning, the other models didn't have access to the web. They had a cutoff date, and if you said what happened yesterday, they would tell you, I don't know anything past March or October. That's changing. So they're all having web access now. But Perplexity was designed from the ground up to give you news. So if I take a second to,
Yeah,
if I
please.
can
Let's launch into
show
some
you a little bit of
demos.
what I'm thinking here, which is this would be the sort of question that you'd look at ideally for Perplexity. So I'm putting a question about NVIDIA's share price because that's hot topic at the moment. And as you can see, it's going out into the web, it's summarizing, and now it's giving me you can see it tells me all of those different sources. It's giving me a graph. It's giving me the data that I want about year-to-date performance, and it's suggesting other questions that I can answer. I think that's a pretty useful way of staying current, and it's a better answer to that question than I would get from Google, frankly. On the other hand, if we talked about the sort of thing that you would use Claude for, if I pull that one up, and here I'm putting myself in the persona of somebody who would be a Claude user. You're a LinkedIn writer. First of all, like always with prompts, I'm telling it, give it a persona and a characteristic. It immediately narrows the field for that AI engine to say, what is it that I'm looking at? Am I a scientific writer? Am I a journalist? Am I an investigator? In this case, I'm just saying, you're a LinkedIn writer. You specialize in that because I wanted to write a post. Again, topic of the day. So I'm telling it, craft me an engaging post about the risks of data. And then I'm putting in a second piece. If I wanted to be thorough, I could add previous material in my style to emulate my style. But instead, I'm going to do a shortcut. And down here, there's a choose style button, which is very powerful. The first three, normal, concise, and explanatory, are sort of givens. They're pre-programmed, and that gives you, a pretty good way to go. The rest are things that I've created. So here down at the bottom, create and edit style, consultant clarity. And there I've given it a prompt, craft a professional, strategically persuasive narrative like a consultant would. Tech storyteller, which is kind of what I'm doing in the newsletter. So let's just say I put a tech storyteller background. I give it this prompt. Now it's going to think about, when I said tech storyteller, it's going to look at other material that's there, and that it's going to try and give that persona. And here is my draft LinkedIn prompt. You can have an opinion about whether that does sound human or AI generated, but it's a good start. And this is the sort of thing that people are using Claude for instead of Chat-GPT. And then, of course, Chat-GPT is the core, and that's where 70% of the people are. But it has some exciting new features. So before we dive into that, I've got a couple of examples of Chat-GPT. Chris, maybe it's worth just talking a little bit about why people use AI today. I mean,
Please.
you're a creative. What are your thoughts about what different aspects of AI are relevant?
I think it's interesting that you asked that, right? I'm a writer professionally, have been for a long time. And, a couple of years ago, using ChatGPT to write something, I would go like, well, by the time I prompted it to write the way I wanted it to write, I could have written the thing already, right? But that's changed a lot in the time frame now. And so it gets you 80% of the way there. If you say, hey, write something, like, yeah, it looks AI generated, but I can use that. It helps get me like sort of a running start, right? So I can take that and then sort of make it my own. So I have shed any sort of inhibitions about using it to create, I use it a lot for summaries and briefings and things like that. But in terms of writing something, I am not shy about using it as a first start because I know that I can go in and enhance it the way I want to.
I think you just encapsulated for me what the value of AI is to most people today, most non-technical users who aren't in it permanently, and that is, this AI is not a replacement for something that you do. It's like having a PhD level or at least graduate student level intern who is sitting there like a puppy waiting for you to give it instructions. And if you give it bad instructions, you're going to get a bad result. And it's not going to replace you. You're not worried that your job is going to be taken by a 23-year-old PhD student. that PhD student can be helpful, and you can say, go away and write me 3 drafts, 3 different drafts using 3 different styles, or research something or whatever it is, and come back and bring it to me, and I will apply my experience and my brain and my creativity and my natural talents to what you've given me, and I'll come out hopefully more quickly and possibly with a better outcome, but certainly it'll be Chris Albrecht's writing, not ChatGPT's. It can be assisted by or prompted by, but that's the point, is leveraging human creativity, not replacing it.
Well, and I think also, as we've had different discussions on this through open water webinars with like recruiters talking about cover letters, they're like, yeah, use AI to create cover letters, right? Like that, one, if they even get read at all, but two, that's such a performative, like rote thing. Like, don't spend your cycles trying to come up with one, just have ChatGPT do it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So that aspect of creativity, whether you use ChatGPT, which does a pretty good job, as you say, or you prefer to look at Claude because this creative community feels that that's slightly better, more human output. That's one aspect. The other things that people, non-technical people again, could be using AI engines for, where it might make a difference, would be thinking about problems of logic or reasoning. Now, that was absolutely impossible in the first iteration of ChatGPT, and it's now absolutely possible. And we can maybe show an example of that in a second. People are liking the fact that they can interact with voice. So if I just have on my phone here, it's a programmed button on my iPhone. It will log up, and out pops this voice. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, I can hear you clearly. How can I help you today?
Well, I'd like to know what happened to NVIDIA's share price yesterday.
NVIDIA's share price fell by 4% yesterday, closing at 118.
So that capability exists on the phone, and for some folk, taking a morning walk and chatting back and forth about ideas for the day, making notes, is a useful way to interact. You pop in your headphones and off you go. And there's some folk who swear by that as part of their daily routine, having a conversational friend. So for them, that capability is important. And right now, ChatGPT is the leader in that capability. It also, by the way, and I won't demo this, but you can hold up the phone, pop the camera button, hold it up and say, what am I seeing around me? And it will give an explanation, a research. So that's this new frontier called multimodal, which means it can look at things, it can listen to things, as well as just engage in a very human-like conversation. That, by the way, that voice, in this latest iteration, you can interrupt, you can redirect, you can steer it in whatever way you want to do. So it is really like having a human. Your research assistant is now not only sitting waiting for you to give written instructions, but sitting waiting for you to engage in a conversation.
For the folks at home, was that were you using ChatGPT in that instance? So you
I
downloaded
was
ChatGPT.
using the iPhone app of ChatGPT, and in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little black button with voice waves on it. You just pop that, and it starts to chat. And by the way, it gives you a written record. So if you say, give me ideas, give me 5 ideas for a piece that I have to write today, or how am I strategically going to approach this conversation that I have, and it tells you, and you have a conversation. When you get home, you have a written record of that conversation, so you can actually hopefully make use of it. So the other pieces that are not really part of our work lives, but for creatives can be fun, is image generation or movie making, and and the specialist apps for those. But most of these general apps can give you some idea. So draw me a picture of a unicorn running down Central Avenue. I don't use that in my daily life, and you can have my questions. I don't even have good ideas for prompting those pictures, but image generation is another quite popular use. Logos, pictures to accompany your text, etc.
I think that's where I get stuck a lot too. I get stuck on stupid. A prompt comes up and I'm like, I don't know what to ask, right? Like the entire universe is at my disposal, and I get sort of option paralysis if I don't have like a very specific thing. So I feel like as a result, I'm not taking advantage of what AI can do. So like having the example of a ChatGPT voice assistant saying, hey, run down today's news, is a really good example of like avoiding sort of option paralysis.
The other idea is these are quite creative. You could ask ChatGPT, say, give me 5 ideas. I'd like to expand my understanding of your capabilities. Give me 5 ideas of how I might do that. And you'll be surprised at the answer. But if I may, Chris, there's a couple of other things that I think folk might be interested in chatting about. in terms of using, these AI models. And one of them is sort of research. Now, that could be obviously all the way up to top academic research, in which case you'd go to specialized models, but just generally research, curiosity about finding out about things. How do I do that? And is there a system that's kind of well suited to that? And there's something that's just come out recently that I think is worth mentioning. So we talked, if I may, I'm going to share my screen again. And I hope it is this one.
There we go. Yep.
We talked about Google, and Google has a general purpose model called Gemini. And Gemini comes in a bunch of different flavors. And its basic flavor is pretty much the same as Chat-GPT or the others that we've been talking about, but it has some additional features. So the first thing is this is just a Gemini screen. But up here in the top left, you can see what I've picked at the moment. But if you just click on that, you can see the different model choices. 1.5 Pro and 1.5 Flash are their basic models for doing ChatGPT stuff. They've released the latest thinking models in a form that you can play with, which are these 2.0s, and that would be this more complex thinking problems that I'm going to show in a second in a different model, but you can play with that in Gemini. But the one that I want to show you and anybody who's watching is this new feature, Gemini 1.5 Pro with deep research. And what it's doing is thinking about your question, going away and planning a way to attack that question from a research perspective, coming back and asking you if you'd like to do that, and then going ahead and executing quite a complex research thing. So I had a prompt up here, but I sadly started. So I'm just going to say, my daughter has just joined a firm that is looking at GLP for alcohol and drugs.
Okay.
So I'm asking it just that question. Do GLP-1s... Okay. So I ask a very general question, just like I would any ChatGPT. In this case, it's not coming back with an answer. It's going to think about it and say, what should I do? Here's my proposed plan of attack. I should look at research websites to ask these questions, including looking at FDA, NIH, etc. So a thoughtful sense of response. Analyze the results and create and then I say, okay, I can edit the plan if I don't like it, or I say start research, and off it goes. So this is something that is going to teach me about a topic. It's more complicated and more robust than just asking a ChatGPT, and I think it's an excellent beginning. It also is illustrating, Chris, a capability which is going to become very much the top topic of 2025, which is AI agents. AI is not just a question and answer thing anymore. It's AI taking action on your behalf. In this case,
it's also referred to as agentic, I think, right?
Yes,
like
exactly.
So that's just a term people might hear in the news.
So this is the first agent, or the first step in this is say, I'm a planner. I'm a research planning agent. And all it does, that agent, is go away and think about, how can I really tackle this question in a robust way? Here's a suggestion. And I can edit it or not. I can accept it. Then it says, yes, now I'm an operational agent. I'm a research agent. And you can see in front of our eyes, it's going and getting all of these different sources on the web. And it'll pass that information back to a third agent who will analyze that, if you remember the top steps on the plan. And then the final agent will turn that into a report. So it's a very thoughtful process. There's a lot of logic checking along the way, and it's going to give you something that I would call quasi-academic. So if you were an academic, you'd say this is a good starting point. If you're like me and you just want to understand a question a bit more in depth than popping it into ChatGPT, it's a very good answer. So I think I will... it won't wait for the answer to come up, but you get the idea, right? At the end, it would synthesize that into a quasi-academic report drawing on all these sources. And so it's a good use of agents, and it's a good use of AI to do something deeper and more thoughtful than we've historically understood that it would.
So I want to get into, I want to just side note here real quick, because one thing I don't think people realize is that they can combine different AI engines, right? So one thing that I saw was using Perplexity to dig up all news about a certain topic, right? And then taking those sources and dumping them into Google Notebook and saying, find market trends, right? So that's an example of using of sort of combining the two. I don't know if that 1.5 research sort of eliminates the need for those kinds of things, but I'm wondering if you can talk about, like, do you ever mix and match your AI tools?
Sure. And because I'm in the category of believing that Claude does a good job of writing, I might go and do my research somewhere else in another engine, as I say, Perplexity if it's current news, this deep research if it's something deep, and then I'll inevitably take that output, say to Claude, okay, make this sound more human and accessible. This is a bit dense. This is a bit whatever it is. It lacks what I need. Try again. And so yes, combining the two to get the skills is very much a contemporary exercise that is worth trying out for those who, for whom it matters.
And see, look at me go now, because I'm going to use that to segue into the next demo, which is you showed us Gemini, but then there's also Notebook LLM or Notebook. I keep wanting to say LLM for obvious reasons, but Notebook LM from Google. And so can you sort of tell us what's the difference between the two? When would you use one or the other? And I think you have something queued up to show us about Notebook.
Yeah, so Notebook is another experimental, LM stands for language model, another experimental product from Google that has been very popular. And there's one particular trait that I'll show in a second. But it's basically a way to gather knowledge and then interrogate that knowledge in a way that helps you learn. So different people have different ways of engaging with material. Some can just read it and absorb it, and that's fine. Some like to have it as a Q&A. Some like to have it presented in different ways that they can ask specific questions, but not specific questions of the entire universe, as you might do if you address Chat-GPT, but specific questions about a website or a PDF or a collection of websites and PDFs on a particular topic. So you organize your life into notebooks, and each notebook has a piece of content or a number of pieces of content relevant to that, and you only interact with that content, and it's been designed to say, how do you like to interact with your material? So if I can show that to you.
Because there's one feature in particular I know you're going to show that is sort of mind-blowing.
So if I were, for example, to create a new notebook and here upload, you can see the choices that are available to me. I can upload a website, YouTube, some text I just copy, docs, some regular documentation. So if I'm going to go in here and just look for, I had something set up, but it didn't show up. So give me 1 second.
It's frozen. You might need to stop sharing and re-share again.
Okay, so I will.
There we go. It's okay. Now you can share again.
I'm ready to go.
Okay, let's go.
I just need to find a source of information because the one I had set up there didn't carry over. So I'm.
That's all right. I'll use this time while you're looking to remind people we got a couple questions in the queue. We'll get to them in just a moment. But if you have questions for Justin, I highly recommend you ask them right now. And also just know that he is an Open Water member, and you can reach out to him on the Open Water platform. And he's also at Here.Now.AI, which I recommend that you subscribe to.
I am trying to find something that might be. It's very scary when you go onto YouTube and see what.
This is how to get
okay.
If you want to drop this,
so I've now found a YouTube video, and the advertisement is what's here. So I'm going back and I'm going to share again, Chris.
Okay.
I apologize for that technical glitch.
It's a Zoom webinar.
But
baked into the equation.
You can see how quick and easy it is. So I've just picked a YouTube video, and I've just all I've done is upload that YouTube video.
Uh-oh.
Oh, and no, it's cannot be imported. Okay, I think, Chris, that I'm going to pause there because there's no sense in wasting time. But what you would do is put your YouTube, your document, your web link, etc. in here. You would then be able to generate, as you can see here, a study guide, an FAQ, a briefing doc, a timeline, whatever piece of engagement that you want. And most importantly, this button, a deep dive conversation between two hosts. And remarkably, and within a few minutes of looking at your material, you'll find yourself listening to a conversation between two very human and engaging podcast hosts talking about your material.
It's crazy. It's bonkers. Like, I have used it. I've just uploaded like a PDF, like a white paper,
Yeah.
and then had it generate a conversation. And yeah, you can tell it's AI host, but that doesn't matter. Like, they're having a conversation that just covers all of the main points, so you could take it on the go and listen as you're on your walk or whatever.
Exactly, and that's the main point, right? It's not to be definitive. It takes about 9 minutes, and so if you're putting up a PhD thesis, you're not going to get the full depth of the of the PhD thesis, but it'll get you going, and then you can ask questions about the rest of it when you're there. And in fact, the latest feature is there's a little button, and you can pop the button, and it says, "Oh, we have a question from our audience," and we'll take your question live, voice spoken, and answer it on the fly. So it's a remarkable technology, and I apologize that the demo didn't work the way I planned, but it's worth, anybody out there should be playing with it just to see what AI can do.
Yeah, really, bonkers is the only word I can use for it, because it is crazy. I'm gonna go to some of the questions we have. A number of these, Stu wants to know, a number of these services have free and paid tiers. Which, hold on. Woo, sneezed at exactly the wrong time. That's professional hosting right there. A number of these services like Chat-GPT, Perplexity, Claude, et cetera, have free and paid tiers. Which of the paid services tiers do you think are the most valuable? Does it really depend on your expected use? What do you think people should pay for?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that the answer really is embedded in that question. It depends what your use case is. Most people can get by, and of the 70% of ChatGPT, I would say the vast majority are not paying. So the free tier is pretty good. And when a new feature comes out, it's generally rolled out to the paying people first, and then a few months later rolled into the regular product. So if you're not in a hurry to try out something, you do pretty well on all of these with just the regular feature. ChatGPT, because of some of these things that I'm talking about, some of these extra features, and there's a couple of others that we should mention before we sort of switch to the big question of the day, I think, which is DeepSeek. We can't finish without.
Oh, we'll get to that, but let's, yeah.
But a ChatGPT, as it adds these features, well, its most comprehensive, successful deep thinking model called O3 is available only to those currently on the $200 a month plan, which is a small group of people. And for them, if it helps them in solving a major problem at work, it's probably worth $200 a month. But for the vast majority of us, that's nice to have, but I'll wait until it comes along into my $20 a month plan. I'm in that middle zone where I like to see the features, obviously for my own use, but also to write about. So I pay for ChatGPT and for Gemini for the advanced features. But I think unless there's plenty of exploration to be done with the free tiers until you decide what you really love and what's not accessible to you before you pay. And most, even heavy users, end up paying for one or two services, generally $20 a month, but don't need to pay for everything.
Two quick follow-up things on that. At one point, at least a couple months ago, if you are an Xfinity subscriber, one of the Xfinity perks was getting Perplexity Pro for a year. So there's actually a website called Xfinity Perks. So I would recommend checking that out, because then it's already baked into your subscription. But the other, what we also haven't talked about is like Apple Intelligence, right? And so, for people who have iPhones, can they just use Siri? What is Siri tapping into? How does that work? As it relates to sort of these other models and getting stuff done.
Yeah, I would say Siri is, frankly, a bit of a disappointment. And I know Apple are investing a lot of resources into changing that. So I would say Siri is not yet a useful comparison to ChatGPT or whatever. You saw I used the ChatGPT app on my phone instead of calling up Siri. The benefit of Siri is that it understands all of your information on your phone. It has access to your calendar and your contacts and documents and what have you. And it has Apple privacy. So you know that information is going to be secure. And its latest iteration, if it can't answer a question, it goes to ChatGPT. But it tells you first, I'm going to go to ChatGPT. Is that okay? It's still quite clunky. And so, yes, you can get there, But I would say downloading a ChatGPT app on your phone is currently better, and just wait for Apple to get themselves sorted out, which I have no doubt they will.
Okay. Another question from the audience, which is how important and effective is it to train Claude to know your writing style? You created one-line personas. Is that the best approach to create your persona? Should you provide it prior pieces or background to inform it?
The more you give it, the better the result. So I just showed a quick demo, but if you were to upload 2 or 3 pieces of previous writing and say, I want you to emulate the style, if you were able to describe yourself, and creative people often can describe your own writing style in a persuasive, clear way, it's going to benefit from that, and you'll get a better and better result. So I strongly encourage anybody who's going to use this seriously to give it as much opportunity to learn from you about what your voice is, what you sound like, as you can. Definitely worth it to train.
Can I also upload a link? So if I have, like, I used to write as a journalist, could I upload a link that had all of my stories? Would it be able to go from there, or do I need
Not
to
at the
upload like
moment, no.
individually? Okay.
Not at the moment. You'd have to upload the individual pieces.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions here, and they're good because I think other people will learn from them. So I want to keep rolling if that's all right with you.
Sure.
Catherine wants to know what are good tools for creating logos, images for slides or formatted slides?
So for slides, everybody at the moment seems to like Gamma AI, GAMMA.ai. It's an AI-driven, as it suggests, producer of material that is quite slick and includes illustrations and what have you, and is much easier than, than trying to do it the old PowerPoint way. Microsoft, we should have mentioned, Microsoft is introducing AI features directly into its product. So if you're in the Microsoft universe, you will find AI applications within PowerPoint, within Word, etc., that are quite useful. They're largely based off OpenAI technology, although they recently announced that they're going to be incorporating some of these DeepSeek models into their work. They're a bit clunky unless you're a power Microsoft user. So you can actually have AI help you create slides inside PowerPoint, but Gamma.ai is that one. Image generation for logos is not a field that I have expertise in, so I know that a number of folk offer that. There are GPTs on the GPT store that claim to be good at logo generation, but it's not a skill that I have.
Kara wants to know if there are tools to help create websites that
Yes.
include things like, I mean, let's start with just that basic, and then like how feature rich are the websites?
Yeah, so Wix is a good example of an AI generated website creator. There are a number out there. And I would say that they're becoming more sophisticated, like all of these AI products, quite quickly. And so I'm hesitant to say they provide what looks like AI generated material. Again, the depth and success of your prompting is going to drive the outcome. But you can come from a very clear prompt: build me a site that's integrated to Shopify to sell my whatever the particular product is, using a country theme with illustrations reminiscent of whatever. And you can get a pretty decent first cut at that. True website creatives will look at that and say, well, that looks like it's AI generated, but it depends on what your purpose is. If your purpose is to get something up there quickly and easily, there are tools that'll help you do that, and Wix would be a good place to start.
Great. So this question will get us into the DeepSeek, I think, because Rachel wants to know, in the coming months, what should we keep an eye out for as far as interesting new features, benefits, or trends? But I think that can tie in because earlier this week, DeepSeek sent shockwaves through the whole AI industry. So let's start there. What did DeepSeek do? Why is it causing all this hullabaloo? And then what should we be on the lookout for as a result of that?
Yeah, so DeepSeek is a product created by supposedly a 6-person hedge fund in China. And it came out with a model that basically matches the latest Chat-GPT on the objective benchmarks by which models are measured. So if you run it through these tests, you'll see it shows up at roughly speaking the same performance level. That's not to say about using it by hand. It reasons, so it's called R1, and so it shows you its reasoning, and I have a demonstration. I can give you a quick example. But Most importantly, it was supposedly trained on $6 million as opposed to the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that OpenAI and competitors are using to train their models. And it was trained on AI, the smaller number of AI chips that are a generation behind the latest NVIDIA chips. So if you take that at face value, that means that we're spending way too much money building AI plants and investing in the latest NVIDIA chips to get a product that is comparable to the latest AI models. And I say take that at value because not a lot is known about the company. There's been, certainly in the app iteration, which became the #1 downloaded app on the Apple App Store for some period of time, it's very clear that that is sending enormous amounts of your private data back to China, to a server, which one would have to have some concern about, given we've just outlawed TikTok for exactly the same reasons. The OpenAI are saying it was trained on our proprietary model, so the technology may not all be original. So it's a mixed story, and one of the things to watch is how this plays out over time. Because if the superficial answer is true, you need $6 million, not 600 million. You don't need the latest NVIDIA chips. It has huge implications for, obviously, chip making and data center growth, etc. But even if it's not that, if it's something in between and there's a little bit of fudge on where the data came from or where the models came from, it shows an interesting trend, which is these models are being developed and then improved quickly. And improved can mean doing better in terms of reasoning, which has been a huge step forward, or improved could mean doing the same job with less resources, less power, less chip compute, less training models, etc. And I think that that's inevitably the way that we're going to go. And so I'd watch for that coming from the big OpenAIs and other competitors, where they're saying the next iteration is not that my model is that much smarter. So O3, this grand reasoning model, is going to be a huge step forward, apparently, but only for those paying, at the moment, only for those paying $200 a month. And we'd like to see that in action. But the next model might be I'm doing the same thing, but I've halved the amount of energy that I'm consuming or something like that. So the DeepSeek piece is important. But what is also important is if you have any discomfort about sending your data to China, as you might have as a TikTok user, plenty of people say that's fine. I'm fine. TikTok, can have my data and do with it what they will. But if you have that concern, then it's important that if you want to play with DeepSeek, you do it in a way that is constrained locally, so that you have confidence that the models are running on your own machine, on a trusted provider's machine. But for all that, it's an interesting product. And if I may, Chris, probably a last demo, I'd like to just show for anybody who's curious.
Take a look at DeepSeek. Is that what we're going to do here real quick?
I hope that that's what we're going to do. Nope, that's not. Oh yeah, here you go. Are you looking at?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're looking at is something that is quite straightforward for anybody who wants to try and do this. In order to run the DeepSeek model, you need a framework around it, and my framework in this case is called LM Studio. So you download LM Studio, and LM Studio allows you to run any number of different models. You can pick and choose from any of the open source models. So Meta has a number of, its coding, its AI coding is all open source. In this case, I picked a DeepSeek model, and you can see here, it's DeepSeek. Distill means it's been compressed so it can run locally on my machine. So if I ask it any questions or give it any data, it's not sending that data anywhere. I could switch off the internet and it would still work on my local machine. And that's quite straightforward to do. So that shouldn't be intimidating to anybody who wants to play with this. I put up something here just to show, because there's two interesting things. The one is I put in, it's pointless to go and do all this and then ask a trivial question that you'd get out of Chat-GPT, because its whole point is that it's a reasoning model. You see R1 in the title. And so I want to test its reasoning. So I put in an old high school calculus problem that I remembered, explaining to a high school student the calculus behind, there was this idea of a sphere, and water is coming in at a constant rate. And therefore, because the sphere, the diameter of the sphere is changing, the speed at which it's filling up on the side is constantly changing. So it's a classic sort of high school or AP calculus problem. And it thought about it, and you can see it chugged, not like ChatGPT. It thought about it for 9 minutes and 48 seconds, almost 10 minutes to go through and come up with a solution. And then here it gave me my solution, and it's correct. So it's good to know that it can do not advanced calculus, but certainly AP calculus successfully. But more interesting is the fact that it took 10 minutes to think about it. So if I click on this button here, what DeepSeek is doing, which other models aren't at the moment, is explaining to you exactly what it's thinking about. So listen to this. Okay, so I need to figure out how to calculate the speed at which a sphere of radius r is being filled up along its circumference when a flow rate of liquid F is input. This sounds like a related rates problem in calculus. So it's identified the sphere. Let me try to break it down step by step. First off, let's visualize the scenario. I remember that related rates problems. Let me denote V as the volume, and it goes through, if we consider a cross-section. But wait, spheres aren't like cylinders. Their cross-sectional areas aren't straightforward when you slice them. You can see this logic unfolding and the calculations unfolding. So this is what it did for 10 minutes, and it's telling us what it did for those 10 minutes. So for those who really want to know what's going under the hood of an AI model, here it is. Wait, perhaps I'm overcomplicating it. It's talking to you in very human language. Let me try that. And so it's trying different things. It's saying, does it work? It's going back and checking its own logic, and ultimately coming, you can see page after page of its thinking. Let me try this approach step by step. Let me factor out. And so without spending too much time on it, it's a thinking model that's showing you how it thinks. And I think that for that reason alone, it's potentially worth trying out for anybody who's curious about it.
Okay, in the closing minutes here, Justin, what I want to do is just for the audience, presumably most of them are new to or just sort of dabbled with it. What is one or two things that they could do today that you recommend they do to not only get started with AA, but get started with AI, but be productive with it, right? So it's not just like, oh, I downloaded the app and I asked it like, something really generic. What are a couple of things people can do right now?
So I think for starters, we talked about Notebook LM, and I'm sorry that the demo didn't work, but I think that's such a fantastic technology that if you have a subject matter, a piece of paper, a website, a YouTube video that you want to explore, try it and turn it into a podcast and listen. That's it might spark learning for you, but B, it's an extraordinary technology that I think people should be aware is out there, and they can think about how to use that. The second is if you're at all in the writing sphere, whether you're putting posts on LinkedIn or social media somehow or any other way, writing letters that matter, try Claude and see if you think that you agree that it gives a more human output with prompting. And the better you prompt it, again, the more material you give it to learn from, the better you'll see. But I think that's worth experimenting with. I try to encourage people to think about what their day looks like. We all have a sort of task list at the beginning of the day, and think about which of those tasks might benefit from help from AI. And if you're not sure, ask. So here are the 10 things I want to achieve today. What can you help me do? And Chat-GPT will probably come up with a reasonable answer.
Excellent. I think that's an excellent place to leave off. Justin Simpson, where can people find you and your newsletter?
So www.Here.Now.AI.com is both the newsletter, and I'm Justin at Here.Now.AI.com. But I'm on open water, so for anybody who's a member of the network, please reach out. And if there's anything I can do to help with anything I've said, I'd be very happy to hear from anyone.
Excellent. Justin Simpson, thank you so much for walking us through a wonderful array of AI tips and tricks today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to see you.